Good Monday morning, everyone. J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à la...
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 31 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration.
Benefits of our witnesses today. I think everybody in the room has done this many times, so I don't think I have to go into full detail, but I'll just remind everyone who is speaking that I will provide you, I'll do my best to provide you a 1-minute warning before your timing ends. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. Please do not speak over each other, as it'll be hard for our translators to translate and it makes their job difficult. Of course, please ensure that all of your comments are addressed to the chair. And members, kindly raise your hand if you wish to speak. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can. And thanks everyone for your cooperation. I should also say, I know that we have some new members here, and I just warmly want to welcome them. Bienvenue à Monsieur Nathilien Joseph. Welcome.
Welcome, Mr. Joseph.
To Ms. Dolly Begum. Welcome to our committee. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the meeting on September 16, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of Canada's immigration system. This is our 15th session on this study. And for this first hour, we are focused on the 2026 Auditor General Report on International Students Program Reforms. I'd like to warmly welcome our two guests this morning. We have the Honorable Lena Mettledge-Diab, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, and we also have our new-ish Deputy Minister, Ted Gallivan, from the Department of Citizenship and Immigration. A warm welcome again to both of you. Minister, you have 5 minutes for opening remarks, and your time begins now.
Thank you, Chair, and colleagues, good morning. We're here to discuss the International Student Program and the Auditor General's report. As I said the last time I appeared at this committee, we welcome the Auditor's report that the International Student Program must have stronger oversight to eliminate fraud. The report covered a period starting from January 2023 and spanning the first year and a half of a 4-year-plus reform plan that had already been initiated by the department. The final years of our multi-year reforms to strengthen the integrity of the program will benefit from the auditor's recommendations. The report found important improvements. It showed that the new arrivals dropped by more than 60% in 2025, that the letter of acceptance verification system is preventing fraud, the cancellation of the student direct stream, which was a high source of fraudulent activity, was very effective. However, the issues raised by the Auditor General are being taken seriously. Officers are expected to flag, investigate, and report suspected cases of potential fraud. Our teams will review all cases in the program flagged by the report by the end of 2026. Anyone who has submitted a fraudulent document in the past will have a note on their file for future border and immigration decisions. Nous allons également nous pencher sur le renouvellement.
We're also addressing study permit renewals. We have implemented an advanced analytics model to triage permit extensions and to assign them based on risk profile. Extensions for those who came through the student direct stream are receiving the additional scrutiny. By the fall, we expect to complete our audit of the permit extensions in the report.
Improvements were made and that more work is needed. I want to clarify the cases that were flagged as potentially non-compliant in the auditor's report. There was 153,000 cases that were flagged by schools for potential non-compliance. The department has since broken down that number. 78% were cleared. The students were compliant, or they transferred to another school or applied to another stream. The rest, 22%, were presumed to have left the country but may have overstayed their permits. To avoid this issue from repeating, we're working on a process to identify and confirm when students with expired permits and no other applications in progress have left Canada. Cela aiderait également la ASFC.
This will also help the CBSA with potential enforcement action. Again, we expect to implement this system by the end of the year. We're also following up on 100% of flagged cases. We continue regular consultations on program allocations with partners, including provinces and territories. This helps ensure provinces and territories have flexibility to align permits with their labor market needs and priorities and the capacities of institutions and communities.
We'll review all cases flagged by the auditor. We'll have added measures to strengthen program integrity, and we will remain on track to meet the planned 4-year reforms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, and thank you for staying within your 5 minutes. Because I want to get as many questioners in as possible, I'm going to be very strict on time today. We begin with our first round of questions for 6 minutes, and we begin with Mr. Redekop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses, Minister and Deputy Minister, for being here. Minister, it's been 6 weeks since the Auditor General tabled her report. Speaking of the 800 fraudsters that you allowed to enter Canada, how many of them are still in the country as of today?
Thank you, Mr. Redekop, for that question. With regards to the 800, what I could tell you is that IRCC has established a process that if any has misrepresented on a document, they are flagged and can be deported.
So
I
am going to interrupt because we have very limited time. So I guess I understand there's a process. I know that you've got that laid out in your departmental plan. But as of today, in terms of the people, because the process is one thing, but the actual people is another, how many of them are still in the country? Do you know that? I mean, if you don't know, that's fine.
I don't have that information.
Okay. All right. Then do you know how many of those 800 fraudsters made asylum claims?
We do know the numbers that have made asylum claims, but I don't have the number of the 800.
So you have it. Is that something you can provide to the committee then?
So we know that 14% of the total of the 153,000 made asylum claims.
Okay. That's different than the 800 fraudsters, but okay. And as far as the 800 fraudsters that your department didn't investigate, do you know where they are right now?
So again, by the end of the year, the department has an action plan that has been already submitted to the committee. My officials here will talk on that, but there's also a lot of progress that are being done to ensure that we work collaboratively with CBSA a lot more closer.
Right, we've seen the plan, understand it. But so what you're saying is as of right now, you don't know where those are and those people are, those fraudsters, and it's something that will be done in the future. Paragraph 64 of the Auditor General's report talked about the 39,500 individuals that shouldn't be in Canada anymore. How many of those still have valid permits?
So again, at 22%, which is a 33,000 number, that was the number that were flagged that had status expired.
Okay, but you're talking that's a different one. This is the problem with CBSA, the ones that had lost their status and should have been sent out of the country, and that's the 39,500 people that were identified in the Auditor General's report. Do you know how many of those still have valid permits?
I don't have that number right now.
Do you know how many of them claimed asylum?
Oh, again, we know 14% of the total of 153,000 claimed asylum.
Okay, but that's a different. The 153 is a different number. These are the ones that. Okay, so I can see the confusion. So this actually points to a lot of the confusion between CBSA and IRCC, because this is the point where IRCC is not communicating properly with CBSA. Do you know how many of these 39,000 people that the Auditor General found? This is, just to remind you, this is when the Auditor General had to work with you guys because you didn't know what the status of these people were. You assumed they'd left the country, and CBSA found they didn't. Do you know how many of them have left voluntarily?
So, would we have those numbers? May I ask the official that
Sure,
question?
Mr. Galvin.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
If you have those numbers, you could table them with the committee.
I don't have that number with me for sure. I do not.
All right. Can you locate those 39,500 people? Do you know where they are?
So there's work ongoing with the department as well as with CBSA to clarify all of these. Again, there's an action plan happening. There's also a pilot that is in process, which will work towards looking at the entry and
Okay.
exit departures, not just of these students, but any temporary residents.
So could you table within 3 weeks a breakdown of this 153,000 number, the 800 number, which is another one, and the 39,500, just to let us know what their current
Yes,
status is of those
yes.
people?
We,
Okay.
we will
That would be great.
provide you with the details
Okay.
that we have available.
Since the Auditor General's report, has IRCC signed any new protocol, service standard, or agreement with CBSA to ensure fraud, misrepresentation, inadmissibility, and removal files are tracked from referral to actual removal?
So there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of communication back and forth between IRCC and CBSA.
Have there been new protocols agreed to?
There certainly has been, and I can, if you would like to have the information, I can have the official talk about that.
Just very briefly. If,
both on security screening inventories and managing the departure, entry, exit, there have been discussions on the way forward with CBSA jointly. We've agreed to the way forward.
so discussions, does that equal a protocol, or is that something to come?
I think there were detailed discussions, there were decks. I think we understand in detail the priority that we need to apply to this.
Madam Chair, I'm going to pass the remainder of my time to Mr.
1
Davies.
minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of the 21,000, roughly 21,420 would represent the percentage of what you've just identified. Do you know how many of those people are staying in the new hotels that the government has just funded?
So there wouldn't be any, we don't have any hotels. The IRCC doesn't run any hotels.
You funded hotels in Ottawa and in Pickering that have been through your housing program. You've $40 million to Ottawa and 22 some odd million in Pickering. Those communities have purchased hotels. Do you know how many of these students that have claimed asylum are living in those hotels?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please go ahead, Mr. Gallivan.
IRCC does provide funding to other orders of government to arrange for housing. There's been an active discussion about how that's used, and particularly around the question of using hotels. And so, as per my prior testimony, we're
Does that
writing
include
into the
purchasing
terms
real
and
estate?
agreements of the
Sorry.
funding that we
I
provide
only
to
have
other
a-
orders of government
I
around
only
the
have a
question of
second.
hotels. So the question's
I-
appreciated. and
I'm
responsible.
sorry, Mr. Gallivan. I'm sorry, Mr. Davies. That is time. So next we go to 6 minutes to Ms. Sodi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister and Deputy Minister, for attending today. Minister, I have two questions. First, I understand that IRCC has prepared a response to the Auditor General's report, and I know that you mentioned a little bit about it in your opening remarks as well, but are you able to please detail for us what that response will look like and why it's so important to have that response?
Thank you very much, Member. Appreciate the questions. So as we know, the Auditor General's report on International Student Program found some really good things. What we are here to talk about now is the ones that were found that were not so good, because we too care about combating fraud, and we care about having strong oversight in our programs, not just the student program, but all the streams that we have. So with regards to the reforms, though, that were introduced since late 2023, actually, to give confidence to the system, we've already reduced the overall volumes, and we've strengthened the front-end verification through the letter of acceptance offers that comes to IRCC from the educational institutions. Moreover, we had already eliminated the student direct stream, which was the stream that was causing most of or the issues in order to strengthen the program. We also have brought an action plan that has been shared publicly, and I believe the deputy spoke about that when he appeared at a committee. I don't know if it's this committee or another committee, and I would request that he also elaborate a little bit more to the committee here about that action plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just back to the questions about the numbers. Those were symptoms of the fact that IRCC didn't manage an entry-exit regime full stop. And so in the action plan, we're building, in fact, the initial system implementation is in May, to have an indicator in the country or not in the country. And so I think those numbers are symptomatic of the fact that IRCC didn't have a game plan or even an intention to manage the departure of people at the expiration of their visa. We've now taken responsibility for managing that in collaboration with the CBSA. We're beginning pilots next month on what techniques work, when do you intervene with the student. We've also taken responsibility to expand that to other visa streams, because the same thing can exist with visitor visas, with work visas. And so this is a paradigm shift, I think, for IRCC, where we agree with the concern that Canadians have that we're not sure who is in or out of the country, and we're doing the work both from an IT perspective and from a management perspective to manage that more effectively.
Perfect. Thank you for your answer. We've also heard this figure of 153,000 students a few times, potentially, of them being non-compliant. What can you tell us about that group of individuals, and what do we know about whether or not these are actual cases of non-compliance?
Okay, so thank you. Let me break down a little bit. I know we did a little bit of the first question, but if I have a bit more time here. So all the 153,000 cases were reviewed. They were flagged as potentially non-compliant. So of the 153, it was determined that 64% still had valid status in Canada. 14% of them had submitted an asylum claim, as I had said, and they were no longer subject to the student compliance measures, which is why the plan is C-12 was introduced, and hopefully that will accommodate largely that issue, along with many other border integrity issues. So taking together, those were 78% of the cases that were identified that no longer required follow-up on the program for the period 2023 to 2024. So the remaining 22%, which is the 33,000 that something like that, involved individuals whose status expired. Those individuals, some of them would have left the country. We don't have the exact number today. Some may have remained in Canada without applying for a new permit, but because we don't exactly know the specifics of that, the remaining 22%, that's why we've implemented a pilot initiative, which will be the beginnings of the process of an exit system to strengthen compliance within the temporary resident program, not just including international students, but all temporary resident programs. And if there's time, I can have the deputy elaborate a little bit more on that specific program. I think you've already started.
Yeah, I would just say that, successive government, there's been a long-standing question about whether Canada ought to have an entry-exit regime. We have parts of it. There's data within the CBSA. There's data within IRCC. And so what's underway is a stringing together of that information, and so that both organizations have a comprehensive, real-time picture of who is in the country and not. That's the IT aspect. And then there is the work of contacting people and ensuring that they depart the country when their visa expires.
Thank you.
I think I have about
20 seconds.
20 seconds, so I'll use it to say thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sodhi, and thank you, Mr. Gallivan and Minister. Monsieur Deschênes, c'est à vous 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes now, Mr. Deschênes. Mr. Deschênes is on mute. I'm sorry about that. That's a beginner's mistake. Hello, Madam Chair. Hello, everybody. Hello, Madam Minister. Thank you for being there. I'd like to come back on the 153,000 number. The Auditor General said that 2,000 investigations were carried out per year. And, Madam Minister, if I understand you correctly, you're saying you were able to look into the 153,000 cases? Yes, thank you very much for the question. On these 153,000 cases. Allow me to speak to that. There were 3 streams of students in that number of non-compliant cases. 60% of them, 64% of them still have a valid claim in Canada. 14% of them have submitted an asylum claim. So 64 and 14 equals 78%. So those files do not require follow-up anymore. There remains 22%, which IRCC has worked on to follow up for compliance and to determine whether these persons have left Canada or whether they have stayed in Canada. If I may, I will let my Deputy Minister complete my answer on the pilot project. Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I would say is that the work should have been done when the Auditor General arrived. We should have had that answer already to explain why some students decided, for instance, to change schools. We should have followed up, and we should have done so in a timely manner. So to complete the response, we followed up and managed to bring down the paperwork. However, there are still cases that are open, which we will look into. You mentioned 2,000 investigations. We intend to investigate every last case of potential fraud to determine whether people have stayed after the expiry of their visas. So we will investigate more aggressively. Thank you very much. 153,000 were flagged as being potentially non-compliant. So what you are telling us is that 64% of that number, which still have a valid claim. But that's not the question I'm asking you. I'm asking you this. Out of the 153,000 cases, how many did you actually investigate to see whether, yes or no, there was non-compliance? All of those 153,000 files were investigated, or rather will be investigated by the end of 2026. And that's why we have the action plan. And so we are examining all of those files now. Thank you, Madam Minister. You're telling us that you were able to investigate those 153,000 cases over the last 3 weeks? Just a clarification, Madam Chair. We eliminated as a concern 64% of the cases, but 22% remain, which need to be looked into farther. But that number is going to come down because we will confirm that a certain number of persons have left, and then the remaining number of cases will be duly investigated. Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. You're saying that out of the 153,000, you're saying that 64% are valid claims? Are you saying that you investigated those 64%, and did you make sure that the students were respecting the conditions of their visas? Yes, absolutely, we did. We confirmed that these were students. I can't speak to the financial threshold, but yes, we have confirmed that 64% have a valid claim. Did you investigate cases of non-compliance? I understand it's all very well and good to have a study permit, but a student might not respect the conditions of that permit. The Auditor General flagged that. Well, as of now, initially, we have determined that 64% are indeed students and have valid claims. You're asking whether the IRCC should follow up to make sure that visa conditions are indeed respected. We're working on that. We are committed to investigate or to follow through more frequently on the compliance with the conditions of student visas, which had not been done extensively in the past. It was done on an ad hoc basis. From now on, we're going to act more proactively to make sure that visa conditions are indeed respected. So you've identified the cases, but you did not verify whether the conditions were actually being met. Let me repeat again. We originally took the 153,000. First, we verified whether they were compliant or not. We're still sifting through all of those cases.
Merci, Monsieur Deschênes. Now that ends our first round. We now begin our second round for 5 minutes. Mr. Menegakis, you have the first 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to both of our witnesses for appearing before us today. Minister, admittedly, the Auditor General report found big-time problems in screening within your department. So we've talked a little bit this morning about the 153,000 flagged applications. How many in those had ties to terrorist organizations like the IRGC?
To my understanding, none.
You know that? You've met with them, you've gone through the process, you've done the background checks?
Well, again, I don't
You only
think
looked at,
well,
according to
as
the-
I said, of the 153,000, 78% were already eliminated because we know who they are and whether they have status, or the 14% that have claimed asylum. So yes, the department would know. And of the 22%, work is ongoing to determine how many have left the country.
Yeah, it's a little hard to believe that on March 23rd, the Auditor General found 153,000 people, and then boom, magically within a month or so, the problem seems to have been resolved on your end. Still, there are 21,420 people that you're looking into, and there's concern about people being in our communities. Astoundingly, Mr. Gallivan. Well, I still have another question now. So, Mr. Gallivan astoundingly testified that there was no entry or exit system in place in your department. So the question is why? The government has been in power for 11 years now. This is the 11th year. Canadians want to know, we want to know, why there would be no entry or exit system in place.
Well, that's a good question. I wondered the same thing but that's how Canada has been throughout its history. This is nothing new. Canada's never ever had that, ever since Canada was created. So the issue now, and I agree with you, we should have it, and we are working towards it. That is the good news.
But
So I agree with you.
But you let in record numbers of people, millions and millions of people over the past 11 years with no control, no record, no way of having an entry or an exit system. So I'm glad that you agree with me, because it's obviously a major failure of the government over the past 11 years, and that's who you're representing here today. Now, I'm going to pass the rest of my questions off to Mr. Ho.
Minister, according to the AG report, 549,000 study permits expired in 2024, and 39,500 people appear to have no status, with only 16,000 confirmed departures. Do you know where the rest of them are?
Again, that is exactly why we have implemented what we have in order to
So you
determine
want-
each case in terms of where they are, and those that have departed, they're gone, and those that have not, their cases will be flagged
you-
with CBSA for deportation, but
So you
also
weren't tracking
with
them, right?
IRCC, so that if they apply for anything at all, it will be there, and they would be subject to
So you
deportation,
weren't
non-entry
tracking
to
them-
Canada for
you weren't
5
tracking them at
years,
all
and
then?
any other anything
Okay.
else. Yeah.
So basically, you weren't tracking them at all. So how many of the 23,500 people remaining that are still in Canada with no status that was found in the AG report have ties to any terrorist-linked entities?
Madam Chair, if you allow me.
Please go ahead.
These applicants are security screened before they enter in the country. And so while imperfect, that screen would have been applied for people coming in. And so, to the extent that the security screening apparatus is effective,
So is that
that is the control.
So there's none then. I'd like to get the answer from the minister.
Please ask your question again.
1 minute.
Like how many of the 23,500 people have ties to terrorist entities?
Okay, again,
that
thanks
zero?
for the question. They were all screened security screened prior to entering Canada in the first place.
Okay, so Minister, your department used a blanket light touch approach to study permit extensions, even when the AG said a few weeks ago that it should not have used it for high-risk countries. How can Canadians know that terrorists like the one you let in just last week didn't slip through the cracks?
So there's a lot of checks and balances in our immigration system, pre-arrival, before people land, when they are at the border. The system is being
Are
enhanced.
the checks and balances working?
They are working.
Oh, is that right? So of the 153,000 non-compliant study permits, you said earlier that 14% have claimed asylum, so about 21,000 people. How many of these are IRGC or regime-linked individuals? Are you tracking
Again,
this?
as I said before, these students or former students were all screened prior to being admitted as students on student.
So you're
Thank you,
you're
thank you,
confident
Minister.
that none of them
Thank
are?
you,
to
Minister.
Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Ho. That is time. Next, we have 5 minutes for Mr. Genru. Mr. Genru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Minister, for being here. I'm just going to put on my own timer. Not that I don't trust you, Madam Chair. So, Minister, I'm new to the committee here, but trying to catch up on some of the numbers that you've given. So 153,000 non-compliance cases were raised in the Auditor General report. 78% of those are cleared, and 22% have left the country. I think there are some valid questions raised about things like fraud and whatever on the other side. Hoping that perhaps you or Mr. Gallivan can share what's been done to address some of those fraud, because I don't think I heard an answer necessarily to that.
Thank you for that. So we have submitted in a detailed management action plan. It's a public action plan between now and the end of 2026. A number of steps will be done to better monitor and expiring permits, including reviewing all cases that are presented in the report to create alerts on the files where applicable. The work with enforcement partners to review and improve internal processes. Not only is it ongoing, but it's strengthened. There's already been a number of meetings that are happening to ensure that's done. And by the way, that's not just for the student applications. That is for any applications that we have. We're providing CBSA annually with a list of individuals with expired permits who have not applied for or received an extension or applied for or transitioned to permanent residency. Obviously, if you've transitioned to permanent residency, then you're further looked at again, or you've got a valid immigration status. We're also updating our guidance on misrepresentation in terms of anybody that has provided any documents that are fraudulent, and we're optimizing our tools and the compliance processes. And again, I talked about misrepresentation, where fraud is being detected through these letters of acceptance verification. We are expanding our functions to have better collaboration with CBSA, but also with the institutions. Again, we will continue to work with the provinces and the territories when we're talking about admissions of students, because they are the ones who, with the educational institutions that are sort of determining where to go, but to broadening the list of countries. Again, IRCC does not control that, but that is something that the colleges, universities, post-secondary educations are doing. Again, we will be conducting compliance investigations on study permit extension applications that are identified as high risk. With an initial study permit application process, we will initially do all of those that were under the student direct stream. So there's a number of items that are being done to ensure that there's better management, better monitoring, better control of the system. And I will come back to my friend on my rights question. There is why some of these things were not done before, or why no exit or no whatever. You know, Canada was established in 1867, and certainly for generations, immigrants have been coming to Canada to build this country. And I think a lot of us around the table are either immigrants or the sons or daughters of immigrants, or the granddaughters of immigrants. So, you know, that the country's built by immigrants. It's built for Canadians. We want to ensure that we keep it that way. The system has grown to an extent in the last few years after COVID, particularly where it just got to a point where there were many people that were coming because the system allowed them to come because they fit the criteria. There was no temporary resident, whether students, work permits, or temporary resident caps. So that has been instituted in 2024. That is why Canadians in the country is seeing a decline in the numbers of both workers that are coming temporary status as well as students. It is a shock to the system, to a lot of them. We are revamping. In fact, there's been a lot of things that have been done. So thank you so much.
Mr. Généreux. Monsieur Deschênes, vous avez 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Deschênes, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Diab, let's talk about the 800 study permits which were given out, according to the Auditor General, on the basis of misrepresentation or fraudulent information. You said earlier that a note will be put in their files. Are you sure you have clearly identified those 800 people? Yes. My deputy minister has identified all of those individuals. So for each of those individuals, there's been a note put in their files. The Auditor General said that most of those 800 persons were able to obtain other immigration permits. So apart from putting a note in their file, will they be sanctioned? Will they be punished? Yes, that's an important question. In those files, we will investigate those files, and some of these people will see their status canceled here in Canada. And for those whose status will be removed, they will be removed from the country. So we will learn from those scenarios to better adjust our issuing of permits so we can better target individuals. So in 100% of those cases, we will conduct a follow-up, which will lead to the elimination or a recommendation to eliminate the status, and those persons will be removed from the country. How much time do you give yourselves to analyze those 800 cases? Between now and the end of the year, yes, we are going to begin all the investigations before the end of the year. If somebody is hard to find, clearly the investigation could take longer, but our commitment is to make decisions on each one of those cases by the end of the year. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deschênes. Thank you.
I have 5 minutes for Ms. Rempel-Garner.
Thank you. So just to recap some of your answers, of the 800 cases of fraud that the Auditor General report, you don't know where those people are right now?
So we've identified the 800
But could you tell us where they are?
Well, I wouldn't have that information right here at the desk.
So you don't know. So you don't know if they're in the country still or not?
So the 800 cases are in Canada.
Okay, so you haven't removed them from Canada. And just to be clear, you don't have a functioning exit-entry tracking system yet. Is that correct?
Well, the system is in development, but as I said before, this is a function of from 1867.
Madam Chair, if you allow me, I think the entry regime is much more mature than the exit regime.
Okay, so you don't know if people leave. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Minister, you also said that there were no caps on this program until 2024. Is that correct?
I said Canada's system did not have an appropriate cap on temporary resident applications of people coming into the country.
And just to be clear, have you revoked the ability for any colleges that issued permits to fraudulent applications, like to issue new permits? Like, have you said no to any of the colleges that were
Oh, that was absolutely done prior to me being the minister as well.
How
That
many?
was an ongoing in the last number of years.
So which ones did you revoke?
So again, I was a former Minister of Labor and Advanced Education provincially, so I know how it works from a provincial
I'm
perspective.
asking from your purview right now, which colleges have you revoked access
So
to?
provinces and territories have a large play on designating designated learning institutions, and a number of them were de-designated.
Which
I know
ones?
that for sure.
Which
Well,
ones?
we can get you the information in terms
Okay.
of the names.
So there's my colleagues brought up the question of the light touch system, which had a lot of the fraud. Have you abolished that?
So there is no such thing in terms of the way you're
The
describing
file system?
it. We have many systems in
Oh, sorry,
place to
Clarity.
take care of
Okay.
those. Yeah.
And then also, I'm just wondering, just to be clear, you said that 14% of the cases of fraud that were identified by the Auditor General, so that's, by my math, about 21,400 people, they claimed asylum. Is that correct?
14% of the
Yeah.
153. That's correct.
Do you know what the costs to taxpayers were in terms of providing social services to people who were let into the country potentially fraudulently, who then went on to make asylum claims? Have you done that analysis?
That's exactly why we brought C12 in order to curb that practice, because that is not the way to gain entry to Canada's immigration system.
But you still don't know where these people are, right? And you still don't know if they've left the country.
Those
So-
that have put in asylum claims, Canada knows who they are.
Okay, so I
There's
guess
claims
but
before the, yeah.
I guess this is my question. There's a lot of gaps in the system, and yet your government is on track to issue 215,000 roughly new permits between foreign students and temporary foreign workers. Why are you letting in so many more temporary foreign laborers when you don't have a way to track people whose permits might have expired? Like, why are you doing that?
I've traveled across the country. Businesses, communities in all the parts of the country are
Yeah, but what about
need
Canadian
temporary
kids?
workers for many, many different
but
sectors
what
in our
about Canadian?
economy. And we do have a great system. We know people who are coming in. They are security cleared. We know where they're working.
I guess I'm just wondering, if you can't track if people who aren't supposed to be here can leave, why you would be issuing new permits and potentially taking away jobs from Canadian youth in the middle of a jobs crisis. But
1
I
minute.
digress. This is pretty bad, right? Like, even a lot of folks in the media brought out that this was pretty bad. Has the Prime Minister called you at all to discuss maybe speeding up the implementation of some of these things, given that you're issuing over 200,000 new permits? Like, has he called you into his office and said, what the heck?
I have constant meetings with the Prime Minister when we develop our immigration levels plan that was
When was the
tabled
last time you
November
met with him?
5th. And we have discussions all the time. I see the Prime Minister on a weekly basis.
Did he talk to you specifically about the AG report and implementing it fast, fixes faster?
Well, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, but did he meet with you? Like, has he specifically asked you to do that?
As I said, I meet with the Prime Minister. We meet weekly.
Okay, so he has full confidence in you, is what you're saying.
I have confidence in Canadians, and I believe Canadians have confidence in this government and our,
I'll take that
and
as a
our
yes.
work
Thank
that
you,
we were
Minister.
doing.
Thank you, Ms. Rempel-Gardner. Maintenant, on a 5 minutes pour Monsieur Nathilien Joseph. C'est à vous.
Merci, Madame.
5 minutes for Mr. Nathilien Joseph. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Madam Minister, Mr. Deputy Minister, and hello, colleagues. Well, we all know that the Auditor General's report raised some concerns, and clearly the hard work you're doing is bearing fruit, and congratulations, Madam Minister. Please keep up your good work. Madam Minister, in Quebec, we have a different vision when it comes to immigration, especially when it comes to skilled workers in outlying areas. And the government showed flexibility towards Quebec, which needs flexibility. And so can you explain how temporary foreign workers are going to help Quebec companies? Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph, and welcome to this committee, which is a very important one, which is crucial to Canada's economy. Throughout Canada, and also in Quebec, we are working closely with our provincial and Quebec counterparts and with all Quebec MPPs. I've traveled through this country and through Quebec to. There is also an agreement between Canada and Quebec, under which Quebec has a lot of responsibility for immigration. Now, with regard to collaboration between Quebec and the federal government, we've introduced a temporary measure which would allow a targeted number of foreign workers to extend their work permits and thus contribute to the economy of Quebec. As I said, we work closely with the government of Quebec and the minister responsible for immigration in Quebec and with Quebec MPs. I organized a roundtable with businesses in Quebec City, and we heard loud and clear that it was necessary to take this measure, which is an exceptional one, which is limited in time and which is limited to temporary foreign workers in Quebec to help fight the shortage of workers in key sectors where employers have said they wanted to work on a long-term basis with these workers. So we're going to continue to listen, and we are going to continue to work with the government of Quebec City and also with you and the employers of Quebec as well as the citizens of Quebec. I would invite you to reach out anytime if there is a need in your region. Thank you, Madam Minister. I can assure you that that measure is really going to help businesses in Quebec. Now, I understand that the Auditor General studied the situation of study permits. Now, this is also an important issue in Quebec. Can you explain the trends in the last few years in the country, especially in Quebec, with regard to study permits? Yes, absolutely. Allow me to give the floor to my Deputy Minister. If you look at the 2 last years, the demand went down in some places by 75% of new arrivals, but some were already here. And can the Quebec system absorb them all, or can some go to other jurisdictions? So we're looking at managing those who are already here. 45 seconds. Thank you. I'd like to ask a few questions. This is very important because we know that the minister worked extremely hard to bring down the numbers and to reverse the trend. Can you tell us what policies have been introduced in order to reverse the trend of the last few years? Well, the protocol on the Safe Third Country bill and Bill C-12 as well. So Canada gave itself the tools to control its borders. Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph.
We go for 5 minutes with Mr. Redekop, who I believe is sharing with Mr. Davies, and then we go to Ms. Sodi for 5 minutes, and then we wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, I'm still a little bit confused about light touch. So in the Auditor General's report, she mentioned a number of times this idea of light touch, where the department doesn't put a whole lot of effort into, it doesn't do their normal due process. And so the question I'm asking you is, has the department eliminated light touch across the board?
So again, there's 2 processes going on. Are we talking about the student stream, or are we talking about the Immigration Refugee Board?
We're talking about the student stream in the IRCC department.
Madam Chair, there's 2 light touches mentioned in the OEG report. The first is the student direct stream, which has been discontinued, so that stopped the go forward. We still have the people who came while that program existed.
Okay, just on that one, she also mentioned that once, if a file was looked at down the road, that would still apply to light touch to that file.
Madam Chair, the member's correct, as always, in terms of precision. There's a second light touch that was described in the OAG report on the renewal. And so once somebody is a student for 2 years, when we're renewing it, there was an absence of going back to check the financials in particular. And so the department has taken the responsibility, particularly those who came in through the student direct stream in the first instance, they're at higher risk. When those people are renewed, we need to dig into the financials and ensure that the same controls we have for all students now exist.
So there's no light touch done in IRCC anymore. That's what you're saying.
The two light touches described by the OAG, one was discontinued in
fair enough.
2024,
Are there
and the
other
other
light touches that were not described that are still happening?
that's the reference to. It's out of my
of order,
responsibility.
Chair.
The IRB had a paper process.
Point of order, Mr.
Point
Fragiscatos.
of order, the Deputy Minister was trying to get a full answer on the record. I don't believe he was able to do so.
Let's continue.
I'm happy to hear the answer, but what is the other light touches that are being used
So
in the department?
the other process that I believe has been described as light touch is one by the IRB where there was a paper process rather than an in-person interview, and I believe the IRB has suspended that process under review to make sure that they have all the appropriate controls. And so that was the third program that I was aware of that was described as a light touch.
Would you say that when Chinook determines things and an agent then has a very brief look at it to confirm Chinook, is that also a light touch?
I wouldn't comment. I mean, I'm not even sure. I'm describing other people's use of the word light touch, Madam Chair. I myself might not use those words in any instance.
I'll pass my time over to Mr. Davies.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, you have said to me several times during this committee that that IRCC is no longer paying for hotel rooms. You reiterated that again today. But do you agree that municipalities should be using taxpayers' money to purchase real estate? And isn't that just a backdoor way of sort of a bait and switch to spend taxpayers' money to house refugees claimants?
So I did say that, and that is correct. There was a system in place where hotels had been used for asylums.
But they're still being used, Minister. They're
So
still,
there is
instead of you paying
housing-
them directly, you're actually giving money to municipalities. Is there a contribution agreement attached to that?
Yes,
to that funding?
absolutely.
And does it allow them to buy real estate with the taxpayers' money?
There is an agreement. Of course, there's an agreement in place.
And
yes.
it allows them to buy real estate, taxpayers' dollars to buy real estate to house asylum claimants?
Not for asylum claimants.
Well, who?
Madam Chair, I think it would-
Population.
The population? What population?
I think, Mr. Galvin, you want to come in?
I have asked the team at IRCC to tell me what instrument needs to be modified to address this question. I would like to know how we write into the terms and conditions of prohibition. So I've asked for that information. I believe conversations were had about not doing it, and now I've asked for the hard rule that would prohibit it.
So just quickly, I know that when the minister says the population, I'm not sure what you mean by that. But let's move beyond that. You've allowed taxpayers' dollars to be transferred under a contribution agreement to municipalities to buy hotels to house asylum claimants, what I was led to believe. When you sell the building, who gets the proceeds? The tax? Do you get the money back after the municipalities sell the hotels, or is there interest payable on the assets that municipalities are purchasing? I want to know, do they get the money free after the program is done?
So again, there was housing.
No, I'm talking about the purchase of the real estate. If the municipality decides to sell the real estate, who gets the proceeds?
Again, money was transferred to the municipality for housing costs.
But when the real estate is no longer useful under that program and it's sold, who gets the money?
Well, we will take a look at the agreement, as
But-
the deputy said.
So can I
Thank
get a
you,
copy of the
Mr.
contribution
Davies.
agreement?
Thank you, Minister.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Gallivan. We now have 5 minutes for Ms. Sodi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister and Deputy Minister, there have been some mentions about light touch, and I'd like to give the both of you, or one of you, the opportunity to clarify anything that you might like to about this system.
So again, that is not a term that I personally use, but the term that was used in the Auditor General's report in relation to the student direct stream, that was eliminated a while ago. So that was prior to my coming in, and prior, because the entire student direct stream was also eliminated as part of strengthening our, before the audit even was completed, it was eliminated. I think, Deputy, would you mind speaking about the second one that people might be referring to as that?
Sure. The question revolves around people who came in under the student direct stream that was identified to more quickly provide positive decisions to students from certain countries. And I would note Iran wasn't a country participating in the stream, and so I think that would reduce the circle of risk around that. And so on the student direct stream, the question is, having wound down the program to stop any future instances, what are we doing about the people who came in while the program did exist? And the OEG focused on the particular question of a student who is then extending. And if we didn't do a rigorous check of their financials to make sure that they weren't studying merely for the purposes of working, that we really did need to do a more thorough review on the renewal of student visas for anybody that originally came in on. So, they would have a higher risk profile, and we need to do extra due diligence, particularly around the financial bona fides of those students.
Perfect. I just want to talk a little bit about the provincial allocation model. The Auditor General report acknowledges that the department recognized that smaller provinces were being disproportionately affected by the international student reforms. The government has taken corrective action by providing allocation top-ups to certain provinces in April 2024, and also by updating the model for 2025 to use province-specific historical approval rates rather than a single national estimate. Can you walk us through how the department updated the allocation model for 2025 and how it was influenced by the outcomes of 2024 and how it better accounts for the unique circumstances of smaller provinces and their needs?
So the department works in close collaboration with the provinces and territories when it does the allocation of the number. So federally, there is one global number for all of Canada, and then that's divided between the provinces and territories. Again, there's quite a bit of collaboration that goes in. The provinces and territories then make the decisions of how to and who to allocate and how many to each of their designated learning institutions between universities, colleges, other post-secondary educational institutions. What we are now seeing, and I've met a lot with colleges, with universities, with institutions, with their national bodies, but a number of them on the provincial as well sides as well. There's been a lot of volatility in the system since 2024. There's been a lot of changes that has happened. A lot of it has affected the number of people they can recruit, obviously their financial situation, which again, it's a provincial territorial kind of jurisdiction when we talk about that. But we are there as a federal government and as a department to assist them in international recruitment missions, in helping them again on the Francophone side in Destination Canada, going over and ensuring that Canada has the reputation that Canada deserves and has in the world in order to bring top talent. We've also processed PhD students in a 14-day processing, which is which is great because we're looking for global talent to come, and that is part of the initiative that we have taken on in the last number of months. The same with researchers that are coming to our institutions in order to grow our country's economy.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Ms. Sodhi. So that concludes our first hour for our meeting today.
Clarification.
Point of order.
Yes. Could you just, Chair, reiterate the undertakings which the department agreed to today?
I don't have a full list of it. Do you have a full list, Mr. Clerk?
Yeah, the names of the DLIs that have been banned from issuing new permits. Mr. Redekop, I think you had a couple of them.
The 800, the 153,000, and the 39,500. Right.
Okay.
I had the contribution agreements between the federal government and municipalities for the allocation of funds for this purchase of real estate.
What an excellent team
Terms and
effort.
conditions.
Thank you. Now that's in the record, so thank you for that. Thank
We
the
come prepared,
I want to thank
even
the
if they don't.
witnesses for the excellent testimony and for being patient with our questions. I want to thank all my colleagues for their thoughtful questions. We're going to suspend for 5 minutes or so that the witnesses can leave and we can get back in camera to discuss the future report of Canada's immigration system study and discuss our calendar.
Thank you.